Hi there, my name is Toby and these are the 9 principles of body efficiency training, and this is number 3, the Concertina Effect, and I also call this the Zigzag, which you'll see in a minute. And these are really higher dynamic functions of the human body. These are ways we can use the body that we're not aware of. And if we can learn how to do this, this makes our body very efficient. Now what I'm doing here is demonstrating this, and I'm demonstrating this quite dramatically. This guy is trying to push me off the top step. And if you see, I've got parallel legs and my feet are hanging right off the edge, and I've only got socks on, so I could even just slip off the top step. Now, if you understand anything about force or martial arts, you'll know that trying to stand up with parallel legs and receive a perpendicular force pushing you back, it's virtually impossible to do. And I'm demonstrating that it is possible, and I'm right on the edge of a top step, so it's quite dramatic. If he pushes me, I'm going to fall a long way down. And you can see now he's pushing me harder and harder. It's difficult to do, so he's gradually increasing, but you look carefully, I'm quite vertical and he's pushing very, very hard and he can't get me to go down. And now, in fact, I'm even pushing him back. He can't push me hard enough, so I'm pushing him. Now, I've never seen this done by anyone else. In Tai Chi, you can see it with one foot forward. They can resist a strong force. But to do this with parallel legs is extremely difficult, I kid you not. Now, if you look at this, what I'm trying to describe this in a squat position, and this is all to do with the dynamics and the alignment and the way you use your legs and your whole body. So here, if you're standing up straight, you can see in a straight line. And if I squat down like this, using the knees, mostly we just use the knees to go up and down. Here you can see I've got a 90-degree angle in the hips and the ankles, but I've collapsed the knees completely. And what I'm trying to do is create this concertina, or this zigzag shape. If I can create this zigzag shape, it's far more efficient and I can distribute the force through the joints evenly. I take it through the hips, the knees and the ankles. And I've got to create a perfect zigzag, as close to perfect as possible. And this will give a force, this will help me resist a force backwards and forwards. And you see that I've got to expand and contract this concertina up and down. Now if I do like a random one like this, it's all over the place, it's much weaker. I've got to get a perfect one, or try and create as perfect concertina as possible and collapse it evenly. So I've got to have a stretch here at the back hip, I have a stretch here at the knee, and I've got a stretch here at the ankle. And I've got to move the hips and the ankle to one side of the center line and the knee and the head to the other side. And I've got to feel this center line go all the way through, and as I go up and down in the squat, I've got to try and even out the stretch on either side into this perfect zigzag, or this perfect concertina. So this is the principle of it, and if you can manage to do this, you'll see how much more efficient it is, but it's tricky to do. Now, so far we've talked about the cantilever effect, and this is the cantilever effect, just using the hips and the shoulders. You see, I've got to pull the shoulder back to activate the scapula, and this lifts up the shoulder legs more. And the same with the legs. So I lift up at the front, I've actually got to pull the hip backwards to lift the leg up. So I'm doing more than just using the thigh, I'm using the hips and the stretch in the hips to lift up the leg, or lift up the arm, it's the shoulders. So that's the last principle, the cantilever effect. But now this concertina effect is how you collapse the limbs completely. So I've got to collapse the limbs down into a squat. That means I've got to have the cantilever at the hips, so the lower down I go, the more the hip joint projects. But I've got to do the same thing down through the knees and the ankles. And I've got to keep my center line right through the middle of this concertina, or this zigzag. And this is the key. So if I do knees only, see, knees only, you'll feel a lot of pressure on the knees, and you can see the hips lock out, and the only way to go down is rise up onto the ball of the feet. You see, I've got to rise up, and now you can see the hips and the shoulders have not stretched much. They've only gone to 90 degrees. When I zigzag, I've got a bigger stretch in the hips, and I've got a stretch in the ankles. You see, the toes are moving towards the shin bone. I'm taking my weight forward in towards the ball of the foot, so that I've got a stretch in the ankle and a stretch in the hip, and there's my center line right through the middle. I'm trying to create this concertina, this zigzag, and I go up and down through this concertina. It means I've got to control the knees, the hips and the ankles all together. This is very important. You see, I'm trying to avoid taking too much pressure on any one joint by itself. I'm trying to distribute the pressure, distribute the work evenly through all the joints, and this is the way we build it up. If you start by dropping your knees forward over the toes, you'll feel a stretch in the ankle. you want to have that stretch in the ankle. You see the toes are going backwards towards the shin bone. I've got a dramatic stretch in the ankle. And you'll feel that in the knees. Now, to take the pressure off the knees, you now start to lever forward and project your hips backwards. So that takes the pressure off the knees. Hips go backwards. Then you take the knees a bit more forward again, so you put more of a stretch in the ankle, and then to take the pressure off the knees, you project your hips back more. So you take your knees forward, stretch the ankles, then take the hips back and take the pressure off the knees. So the key is you won't feel work or pressure in your knees, you feel a stretch in the ankles and a stretch in the hips. The leg bone has got to move back in the pelvis, and then you go up and down trying to feel this concertina. And now to do the same thing in the arms, it's actually a bit more complicated. The arms are tricky. You see, the same thing, I've got a stretch in the wrist, so this is equivalent to the stretch in the ankle. And then I've got to find another stretch in the shoulders, which will be equivalent to the stretch in the hips. You see, then I want to go up and down with a stretch in the shoulders and a stretch in the wrist. It's not the same as a normal push-up. I'm trying to activate the joints, the tendons in the joints and the stretch in the joints themselves to help do this movement. And I'm using the ligaments to go up and down, a stretch and a recall of the ligaments. And here you can see the whole back muscles, the scapula, even the rib cage is being engaged. It's not just the pectoral muscles and the shoulders. I'm trying to activate the wrist and the entire back, the scapula. Here you can see the shoulders go up and down, you see. So first thing I've got to do is collapse the shoulders down, back rather. So I'm collapsing my spine downwards. You can see my scapula project backwards, and I've got a stretch in the shoulders to go up and down. Now you can see it's a bit easier here standing up, and it's a bit easier to try. See, I'm pushing against the wall, but what I've got to do first of all is feel a little stretch in the wrist, so the wrist is active, and now you can see the shoulder going backwards. See, the first thing I do is allow the shoulder to go back. I've got to stretch backwards and up. See, the shoulder goes back and up, and I've got to stretch now through my back, through the scapula. And the further I collapse, the more I move my shoulder up. See, the shoulder goes up in the socket. I'm collapsing by moving the joint in the socket. I'm not just pivoting the shoulder, I'm rolling the shoulder in the joint. And the lower I collapse, the more my shoulder goes upwards. I'm creating this zigzag or this concertina effect in the joints themselves. It's not so much about the muscles. This is about moving the joints as you collapse the limbs. It's tricky to understand and tricky to feel and tricky to play with this. You've got to have a go. This is the hardest of these principles to explain, and it's taken me years to work this out and even more years to work out how on earth I can explain this, and I really hope I'm able to do it today. But you can see here I'm rolling the shoulder. There's movement in the shoulder joint. I've got to activate the back muscles, the scapula and the rib cage together with the shoulder to do this. It's not just using the front muscles, the pectoral muscles and the deltoids, the shoulder muscle. Now here, let's try this together. We can all do this. Look, if you're just bending and straightening your arms as you're standing up. Now just do this normally without thinking about it. And you see it, bending and straightening the arms, you see the shoulder just pivots. It's just pivoting on the spot. Now I'm trying to do more than just pivot the shoulder. So first things first, you see the shoulders go back. I've got to lift the shoulders up and back, and they stretch back. Now as I bend the arms, the more, see now without bending the shoulders, the more I bend the arms, the more I lift up the shoulders and they go back. So it's not just bending the arms, I'm stretching out the shoulders. And then as the arms go forward, I'm keeping the shoulders up and back. Now this is the first thing to feel. You've got to feel this continuous stretch of the shoulders up and back. And as you try and extend your arms forward but pull the shoulders up and back, you'll feel it activates the scapula. The whole back muscles work, and you've got greater strength in the arms to do this. Now a bit more. As your arms collapse backwards, the shoulders go up and back. But as your elbow goes down, your shoulder goes up. And then the further back you go, the shoulder even starts to come forward a little bit. You're starting to roll the shoulder a little bit forward. Okay, this is where it's different from the hips, you see. But the more I collapse the arms, the more stretch I want in the shoulders. I'm creating this rotation, this circular movement and a stretch in the shoulders, the scapula. And then as I extend the arms forward, the shoulders go up and back more and more and more. And they end up in a bit more like the mid position, but I've created a dynamic tension in the shoulders. Now look at the movement here, bending and straightening the arms. As the arms bend back, the shoulders go up, and in the last bit they go forward, they roll a little bit forward. I'm creating a dramatic stretch through the scapula. And then in order to push the arms forward, it's not so much pushing the arms forward, but lifting the shoulders up and pulling them back. I'm activating the tendons and the scapula to move the arm. It's much, much stronger. I'm using more muscles to do it. And now what I'm demonstrating here is just freestyle movement. You see, I'm moving. What I'm trying to demonstrate is the movement of the arm is not just the shoulder, it's the scapula, the rib cage, and the rotation of the shoulder. The greater the range of motion I can create in my shoulder joint, the greater the power I can create in my arm. The greater the kinetic chain, the whip, I'm creating a whip. You see, I've got to roll the shoulder. The bigger this roll can be, the more movement I can generate in my arm down to the hand, and the greater the whip or the flow that I can create through my body to the hand. And this, of course, is in martial arts, but it is required to generate strength like that in the push-up, also to generate power in the structure. So let's have another look now here at the push-up itself. So full body push-up. This is difficult. I kid you not. Be very careful. You're putting your shoulder and your scapula under great stress to do this. But I'm purposely doing this to train the tendons and the ligaments. See, first my spine collapses, the shoulders go back. You can see the scapula project backwards. I'm dropping my chin forward away from my hands, so I've got to stretch in the wrist. And as I go down, the shoulders go up and forward. And then to go back up again, I'm pulling my shoulders back and down a little bit. So I'm activating the scapula, I'm rolling the shoulders. See, the shoulders are back. As I go down, the shoulders are up, and now they're going forward, they're rolling forward. Now to go up, I've got to pull my shoulders up and back by using the scapula to extend my arms. So it's not my tricep muscle, it's not my pectoral muscle, it's the roll in my shoulder, the ligaments in my shoulder joint and the scapula. And once more here, the squat. It's the same principle as zigzag. As I go up and down, it's not the thigh muscles, it's the stretch in the ligaments of my hips. And now we do the same thing with one leg. So I want to lift one leg up and collapse it. This is how you collapse the leg evenly. You see, the hip has got to go backwards, the knee goes forward, the ankle goes backwards, and I flex the toes back. I've got to create a stretch in my ankle, a stretch in the hip, and then collapse and extend my leg through this center line. Look at the zigzag, the concertina. I collapse and expand this concertina through a center line, and I've got to feel and activate this. The more I collapse it, the more my hip stretches back and the more my ankle stretches. And then you see I've got a stretch through the hip, a stretch in the ankle, and I can release that stretch as I extend the leg out. I'm using a stretch in the ligaments, an even stretch. It's got to be even. If I don't get this stretch through the center line, the force will be weaker because it's uneven. It will be taken by one joint only, and that one joint can't handle so much force. I've got to distribute the movement, distribute the force evenly through the ankle, the knee, the hip and the spine. And in fact, it's not so much the knee. The knee is the weakest part. It's the hip and the ankle, the Achilles tendon and the tendons in the hip. These are extremely strong, and we want to try and activate these. Okay, I hope this made sense. You might have to watch this a few more times, and I might have to do some more videos explaining this in more detail. So please do leave any questions or thoughts in the comments below. I will get back to you, and please stay tuned for the next principle number 4, coming very soon again. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in any of these other videos here.